Hey guys, what's going on? This is David Chin, another edition of Pananomics Podcast, New York Weekly's #1 podcast. And speaking of one of my coolest guys, I recently met an amazing human being, Tommy Pham, head of Nike Gaming Partnerships and also head of the Raiden Foundation. Tommy, what's up? How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Good, man. You know, it's pretty serendipitous how we met, and I want everyone to understand your story and the amazing things that you've accomplished in your career. But today's your 37th birthday, so we're celebrating it today on the podcast. So happy birthday, man. Thank you for coming on. You know, you guys see him, drop a line, follow him. Today is his birthday, and we're so grateful having you come here. Tommy, tell us a little bit about your story, how you started in business and your path in the business.
In the business, I mean, it's been a long journey. I'll tell you a funny story, right? Like, I grew up, my parents were Asian, first generation, immigrant. So I had Tiger mom and Tiger dad, right? It's like, hey, you either be a lawyer, an engineer, or a doctor. And so my whole, pretty much my whole young education career leading up to that point was all about trying to be a doctor. And then I remember, my junior year in college, I went to the University of Portland. I woke up that morning before my MCAT, which is the test to get into med school. I decided not to do it.
Whoa, let me get this straight.
I decided not to do it. I'm like,
and you decided not to do it.
Nope, that morning up, I decided not to do it. I remember calling my girlfriend at the same time. I'm like, I don't feel like doing this. This is not me. Like, I'm feeling pressure, right, to get into med school, but that's not me. She's like, yeah, just follow your passion, right? And so I'm like, cool, that's one person, but let me call my best friend real quick to verify that. I know you're my girlfriend, but let me call my best buddy. He kind of told me the same thing. And yeah, that morning up, decided not to take the test. So just imagine that, right? My parents invested all the resource, all the money. I invested all my time to get into med school and be a doctor, and decided not to do it that morning of. I was surprised they didn't kill me, but they disowned me.
Too.
They disowned me for a while. No kidding. So it was a dark time, because having your parents disown you for not doing what you want, and I'm sure you can relate within the culture, right? Your parents basically set the path for you. Anyways, long story short, did not go into med school. Stayed back at University of Portland. Focus on getting my graduate degree with an MBA, focusing on entrepreneurship. I just wanted to try entrepreneurship. So really fell in love with business. 2 years, and then I went on to work at Oregon Health and Science University, which is a local medical institution here in Portland, Oregon. And so what I did there was tech transfer, where I had an opportunity to learn about science, business, and legal as well. So I'll get to work with the scientists, bring their innovation to life, and then bring it to the marketplace, right? So it's kind of a cool mix of science, business, and legal. And so I did that for a little bit. And while I was at OHSU, I also, the entrepreneurship in me, and I learned about entrepreneurship, I wanted to do a business as well. So I was like, I'm working at OHSU, but I want to license the technology from you guys to try to spin out a company and see if I can do it. And so we spun out a small biotech called Nzumbe. So I'm not going to get into the details of it, but had the opportunity to build a small company from scratch, a small biotech company from scratch. Did that for a few years while working at OHSU, and then just realized, man, the route within the medical field and bringing medicine or medical device to market was just too long. And I'm like, well, I have the experience of starting a company. What's next? What am I really passionate about, right? What do I really want to do? And, I live in Portland, Oregon, and one of the biggest sports company in the world called Nike. I'm like, I think I want to join Nike and do something cool there. And so applied for a job at Nike. This is back in 2014, I believe. Got the job. I was the first ever panel liaison. What that meant was I get to work with different innovators within Nike to see what they're working on that's new and unique, right? Digital innovation of the future, right? Shoe that laces itself, things like that. And being able to work with those innovative and creative minds and learn from them, and also help file patent protection for them was pretty cool. And so that's how I got into like the real business side of things and less on the science side.
Wait a
And
minute.
then,
So you go for, let me get this straight. You are sitting here day before, the day of, walking in this MCAT, and this epiphany happens. And this epiphany has been fighting for probably years or months at this point, stewing and brewing, right? And I want to focus on that. And then you go, after that happens, you go back into school, dealing with what you had to deal with, going out, finishing it up. And then from there, your first job is an amazing job in Science Health. Then you go into Nike, where you're doing a patent liaison. A complete shift, but yet you still worked it out despite the fact that you didn't know that that was going to be the set path, right? Like, in other words, the path had changed. But there was a pivotal moment, right? Like, right before all this had happened, you had to make a really hard decision to follow what you wanted and love at such a young age, despite being shunned. And I think for a lot of minority kids like us, whose parents came from different places, or like myself came from a different place, it's like, I came to this other country so that your life could be better. So why are you effing this up for us and our whole entire family, right? So tell me how you had the balls. I mean, you just had to have massive balls to do that. And then with Asian parents,
I didn't even say that, but that's true. You had to have,
massive balls. Like, excuse my French for those listening to this, but there's a real fear of disownment and a real fear of lack of honor and a real fear of embarrassing that I don't think a lot of people really understand how psychologically hard that is, right? And so you went and did it right in front of everyone, and that was like that pivotal moment, but you followed your passion. Like, what was it at that very moment you're like, dude, I got to follow my passion over everything else?
I think it was just building up, right? Just since like high school, I don't know, maybe just that rebellious mindset of myself, having that mindset and just wanted to do something different. Just wanted to say no to my family and say no to my parents, right? Knowing like the consequences is like disownment. Like my parents would hate me for a long time. I kid you not, like even till today, they're like, you should have, be a doctor. You should have just resumed your career. All that sacrifice, we made. They talk about that still all the time. But, I had to do it for myself. You only live once. That's what's kind of like my mindset.
Wow.
A lot led up to that. Like, now that you mentioned that, there's another thing that happened to me, not to go off topic, during college that made me make that decision. So during college, I did a lot of volunteer work, right? I did volunteer for the Big Brother, Big Sister program. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but you take on a kid normally from a foster home and just be the mentor, right? Be the big brother, be the big sister. I did that for a year, and I had a little brother. He was Black, right? This was 2006. I can't remember the exact date. I remember it was during the holidays. I took him to Circus City when Circus City was still around at that time, to buy him a gift, because that was my little brother. Bought him a gift. It was dark outside. We got into a car and we made a left turn out of Circus City. And right when we made the left turn, it was like, boom. We're like, oh my God, what was that? We hit a couple pedestrian, and it's a family. And so that happened, which is crazy, but they jaywalked.
Wow.
We didn't speed on anything. But that whole case, we went in and out of court. I went in and out of court with my little brother as well for 2 years. So I spent 2 years of my college life in and out of court, learning about the legal system, being in front of jury, defending myself against the whole entire family. I'm not going to go into much detail, but we were found not guilty, right? And so I wouldn't say it was a setup, but they were pushing to get millions of dollars from us, from me, who was still young, and from my little brother, who was, I don't know, was 8 or 9 at the time. It was terrible. I quickly learned about, racism and discrimination. They threw everything at us. Like, hey, he's Asian, he's Black. They were probably listening to like loud music in the car. They didn't pay attention. We heard all that kind of stuff, right? And so like, I learned really quickly, and I grew up pretty quickly. It's like, dude, life is too short. Like, anything can happen. So I think that played into my decision of the morning of my MCAT, saying, no, I'm not going to do this, right? Because 2 years of my life was gone pretty much in and out of court already.
Yeah, what's crazy about that is I bet you the whole entire time you live with the psychological damage that you deserve this, and this was the payback that you had to do for dishonoring your family. I bet you in your head that was what happened. And I think a lot of times we have to realize this: one has nothing to do with the other, but we personally guilt ourselves into doing this because we try to find ways to cope with it. And the other crazy thing, as I hear about you, is when you're sitting there, you're saying, "I didn't have any money. I had to learn how to defend myself." That is the flight or die mentality, right? That is either I got to do this, and bad things happen to us all the time in the world, and that is what we have to do. But you psychologically and emotionally did that, Tommy, and I think that's something that like we don't give enough credit for. You know, at 22, 23, 24, it's hard, man. I mean, 42, it's hard for me. I can't even imagine going back to my 20s nowadays, right? And you had the ability to do that, and you just didn't protect yourself. You protected your family, and that's so beautiful, right? And you know, I think a lot of people don't credit humanity as much as they should, because then that's what led you into understanding from a terrible situation internally to a actual situation where you felt that there was set up where you weren't found guilty of it, and that allowed you to understand law, which then eventually probably led to you being a patent liaison, right? So now you are, you know, by the way, I love Shoe Dogs, one of my favorite books, because it's about you're not going to make it. That's it. It's just like, you're not going to make it. There's no way you're doing it. There's a guy named Michael Jordan who wants these ugly shoes. The NBA went after it, right? And you know the whole story. It's about the book, and so have you, and then you know about, you know, Spencer Haywood and the things that he took on. And the reality was, it's what led to such a beautiful thing that now is inspiring. And so with you as a patent liaison, like, tell me what it felt like when you got that job in your heart, and that pivotal moment where you do something as crazy as that for such a big company.
You know, I was so excited, right? It's like, hey, one, I get to work for a brand I grew up just loving. Like, I'm a big sneakerhead. I love Nike. You know, I love MJ. I love Kobe. Those are all athletes from Nike at the time. But also, like, I was into entrepreneurship. I read a lot about Phil Knight, and I respected him, and being able to work for his company, like, yeah, it was an exciting moment. And also this role, this patent liaison role, was newly created. It never existed before. And so I get to pave the way for that, right? It was a role embedded within legal, but then having the opportunity to work in legal, but work with the business and the innovators across Nike as well. So that was super exciting. It was almost like a dream come true for me. And it's a fun job. I didn't see it as a job. I just saw it as, you know, just my passion, being with the brand and working with innovation. It's super cool.
You're driving on IP, right? And you're driving on this innovation. Tell somebody, when they're working at a Nike, right, the levels that need to be there. What is the biggest misconception at working at a company like Nike?
Can you repeat that, David, so make sure I understand the question?
What is the biggest misconception of we're working at a company like Nike when people are coming in?
The biggest misconception about working at Nike?
Yeah.
Now, let me think about that. Nike is such a family-oriented company. Like, people see Nike as big corporation. You think it's a corporation, but once you're in it, it's like a family. Like, you're bonded together. Like, we all work as a team. Yes, it's a major company with thousands people all around the world, but like, you just feel like you're a family, right? Even with some of the athletes as well, you just feel so connected. I don't think you can get that from a lot of company outside of Nike. Maybe I'm biased, but I'm keeping it real.
Yeah, and on the size of it, right? You're doing patents and you're doing IP. Explain to somebody who's in business how important IP is and why that matters to them, and how Nike looks at it from a more different approach, I think, as opposed to other companies. Like, how do you look at the IP differently, and how does that help people?
IP is so, IP is so crucial for everything. And I'm just commenting not on behalf of Nike, but just in general, right? You need IP, especially when you go into like business or any young entrepreneur. Protecting your innovation is important, because you don't have protection. How do you commercialize it, right? So anybody else can copy your innovation or copy your product if there's no IP protection.
Yeah, and so keeping that is important, because that's your product, and it's important for the digital world, and that allows you to continue to use your brand and your image within different companies, different scopes. And Nike did an amazing thing. You guys are so innovative. One thing that you guys started working on was this ability to work on the NFT space with something really, really cool, the shoes and the sneakerheads. Tell me a little about that, man. That was something really interesting.
Yeah. Before I forget, can I jump topic real quick about
Right.
Shoe Dog? I'll dive into that, but let me jump into about Shoe Dog and about Food Night before I forget, because it's on top of my mind. Is that okay? I don't want to jump.
Of course. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So how I got into Nike, I mean, I applied a ton of time into Nike. It was hard, man. Like getting into Nike is not easy. But I think one of my story helped. And so when I was working at OHSU, right, I remember writing a letter to Phil Knight at the time when he gave Oregon Health and Science University a ton of money, like millions, for cancer research. And I remember writing him a letter just thanking him on behalf of myself. Not even like, oh, just you. I just felt like writing to him because I've always been inspired by Phil Knight. So I wrote him a letter just thanking him for that money because it'll make such an impact, not only for Oregon, but like medical research. So never in a million years would I imagine like Phil would write back to me, right? And so this was around, I want to say 2000 and can't remember, 2013. This is before I joined Nike. And so I remember going home one day, I found a letter from Nike. Again, I thought it was an ad, but it looked so official. And I'm like, whoa, what is this? So I opened the letter, and surprisingly, it was from Phil Knight. And so Phil wrote a letter back to me. That's crazy, right? He wrote back to me. I'm like, man, that is so inspiring that he took the time to like read my letter. I'm sure he gets thousands every month, but actually like writing back to me, and it meant a lot to me. And I guess that's part of the reason why I was so motivated into getting on Nike. I want to work, for someone like Phil Knight that took the time to read my letter and wrote back. And so I remember having that letter, and I was living with my parents at the time, and I hung it up on my wall in my bedroom. Just as a source of inspiration. Now, keep in mind, my dad was from the Vietnam War, and so he suffered a lot from PTSD, right? Now we know that. Back in the days when I was young, I didn't know that. And so we would have like bars all around the house in our window, so like people don't break in. He was always worried about that, right? So I'm just setting this up. So I remember one day coming home from work. It was probably March of 2000. Yeah, it was probably March of 2014. Was it 13? I can't remember the exact date, but one of those dates. I came home, took a nap from work, and when I woke up, my whole house was on fire. My room wasn't on fire yet, and I'm like, yo, like I could get out the house, right? I'm thinking split second there, but check it out. I like bars on my window. I can't break the bars. So I literally just ran out the house, and like shit was just burning. I remember I was like, God, like I need to jump through a couple of fires to get out before this thing blows up, or I'm gonna die in the fire. So I was able to get out before like all the windows just shatter. It was like Mission Impossible type stuff. And yeah, I was able to survive that. And so that was another event in my life, which was kind of crazy.
Wait, what happened? You were sleeping and then it just caught on fire?
Yeah. And so what happened? Like, luckily my parents weren't home. There was a shortage in the electrical outlet in the living room, right? And then next to that outlet was the sofa, and then next to the sofa was the curtains. And
my gosh!
Yeah, and so it just amplified, and the smoke detector didn't work as well. But luckily, I was able to wake up in time to get out the house. Yeah, I survived. And I remember I remember writing back to Phil. I'm like, look, I'm not looking for any kind of shoe. I'm a big sneakerhead, but I'm not asking for any kind of shoe. I wrote back to him and say, hey, that letter that you wrote me meant something to me, right? And so I wrote back to him, and yeah, like one of his admin wrote back and say, hey, Phil is more than happy to do that. And so I got another letter, but this time they had me go up to his office to pick up the letter, and also give me a pair of Air Jordan 3s Oregon Duck. signed by Tinker Hatfield. And if you don't know, Tinker Hatfield is one of the legendary Nike Jordan shoe designer, right, for the past 30, 40 years. And so that's awesome. So now having the letter and that shoe signed by Tinker, I was like, 100%, definitely, I will get into Nike, regardless of what role. I want to get into Nike because of that. And it just happened that my role became this new IP role at Nike. And so it just happened. And I remember going up to his office, and I didn't see Phil at the time, but I saw his admin. I'm like, hey, do you remember me? She's like, yes. I'm like, look, I'm here at Nike now. Like, I want to make a difference at Nike, right? I want to do amazing stuff at Nike. So that's kind of like my Nike story.
But that's a beautiful story, because before we got innovation, and I really appreciate you sharing that. Dude, there's so much, like, I think what everyone here has to understand is there's so much bad things that happen to us, right? On a constant basis out of nowhere. And you literally probably had to run out of like a scene of freaking Backdraft. I can't even imagine which Fire movie I can think of anymore in my head. Maybe like from the 90s when we were kids and stuff, right? Like Backdraft. But dude, like, I can't imagine like looking at these damn bars, already being pissed off that you have the bars because you're at home or whatever his reasonings are. So there's not even an argument at this point, right? You just have to do it. And at the end of it, running out, still going, Dad, we got to take out the bars. And he's probably like, you still got to put on the bars. You know what I mean? Like I'm glad that you're crazy. At that very second, you have this letter, you're running out, you go from there. But all of this started with you just writing something nice in the universe and just being gracious and giving gratitude. And then you finally, through all the tribulation, get to be part of Nike, right? The second run after another amazing, crazy story that gets you where you're at. And it's been such a journey. And now you're at Nike and you're working on things. And before I get to my question I had previously, I want to ask you the question. You see so many people working so hard, all begging to get in Nike, interns, all these guys working hard to get there. When people finally get there, the ones that just kind of take off and go from there and try to make that work, we will absolutely. What do you see in these people and how they make those adjustments, and what happens to them where they somehow shut off and they can't advance in these big businesses? And I see this happen a lot, right? Guys work so hard to get where they want to go, and it's like all of a sudden they get the job and they just stop and they quit, right? What is that? To me, it's almost like you don't appreciate it, or you somehow got to where you thought the top was, and it was just enough where you thought the money was coming in. But I feel like it's a lack of appreciation. But we need someone like you who's jumping through fires and running through other things and talking to Phil twice to get to where you got. It's like now you have it and you're super appreciative of the job. Like you love the job, and things like that. And so that is, what do you see? Like, how do you see where people really make that mistake, and what defines them to, well, they work at big, this is your personal opinion, but work at companies where they're just not excelling once they get what they got?
It's hard, right? Like if you work for such a big company, there's a cap. Like not everybody can be a VP, or not everybody can be CEO. I mean, it's part of accepting part of that too, right? There are many big fish in the pond, and you just have to be satisfied with what you're doing, and also like remove the title from it, right? Like for me, like, hey, I'm leading gaming partnership at Nike right now, but my title is just a manager, right? But that's okay. I'm doing an important job. I know I'm a leader, and I'm satisfied with that.
It's amazing.
And to that opportunity. It's not always about the title. Yeah, I could be senior director, I could be VP, but if I wanted to do that, I would go somewhere else. Like I just want to do something I'm passionate about it. I know I'm satisfied. I know I'm still learning, and I'm making a difference regardless of title, as long as the pay is right.
On the money, man. I remember my first time at Deloitte, I was flying up to China, and I remember I was meeting this guy named Luis Coronado, who's from Mexico, and he was in China. And I remember him telling me this exact story. He goes, David, in any company, it doesn't matter what the title is, you can be whatever you want to be as long as you put in the work and the networking. And I think that's such an important thing, because this is something we preach on this show consistently, is you can be whatever you want if gratitude, which is what you did, leads to a better attitude, which is what you did, and continue to go from there and push it out and high in those high levels. That's super amazing, And as you're doing that, you talk about gaming and how you're head of, gaming, and you're doing the manager side of it. Where do you see gaming with, businesses in general, and how does it amplify and help kids? Like, for me, I'm the biggest advocate because I see what it does to kids. It gives us a place to be. I tell parents all the time, would you rather have your kids from 9 to 3 at home or out there in the streets? And they're like, oh, I'm like, well, then you don't have a problem with them playing video games, right? Like, no, I don't. Well, now you don't have a problem with them playing video games, right? But where do you see that? Because people they get confused, like, oh, athletes are in esports, but they don't realize that, like, whether it's Bronny or Durant or Drake, right? All Nike guys, all in the e-gaming space, all big gamers, right? But where do you see that as a general for businesses with gaming, and how does that excite you?
Gaming is exciting. So I don't know much about your background in terms of gaming. Like, I grew up playing a lot of games. Like, I remember playing Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega, PlayStation, Dreamcast. I love gaming, and now seeing part of gaming as a culture, whether it's entertainment, whether it's sport, it excites me. I think it just accelerated during the pandemic when everybody was locked at home. It's like, what can you really do, right? They found out gaming was an outlet. Gaming was for everything. It's an outlet. It helps with, like, your stress. It also helps with, like, mental stress or cognitive skills building. Everything can resolve around gaming, right? And so it's really cool to see that. And now gaming is becoming like the next social media platform, right? You used to have, was it MySpace, and then Facebook, and then Instagram, and then TikTok.
And for those who know Friendster, that's way back in the day.
Well, I used to be on Asian Avenue. I don't know, you remember
I was on Asian Avenue too, dude. I was on Asian Avenue too.
But now, like, again, this going back to the pandemic, you see a lot of people, not only kids, but people on these gaming platforms like Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite, that are playing, having fun, but also socializing, right? Like, a lot of these platforms is not just like traditional gaming, right? You're in it and you're watching, like, movies or going to concert or checking out, like, outfits as well. So it's I wouldn't say it's a whole new world. I guess it is, but it's from the old world, right? It's just mainstream now. And then gaming can be super complex, or it can be simple as, Candy Crush or something on your cell phone.
What's crazy is you talk about we're the same age group, right? So you remember when the Nintendo first came out and they had the computer guy, the robot guy, but like 90% of them didn't work, right? There was like a Nintendo dropped in animations. I remember the first Nintendo I ever had wasn't mine. First one I ever saw was my cousin. She's in the Philippines, but it was the Japanese version, the purple one, the very first one. And she still has it somewhere. I think I have it somewhere. And you see the navigations, but you remember, like, we were the guys in college that were setting up the Halos, right, off the Ethernet, right, and the Warcraft, and talking about that while playing basketball, right? I just probably imagine, the Asian kids probably saw more, so it's that age group, right? So you're playing ball, Yao started coming out, right? You see Warcraft, you see all this stuff, and you start playing this game, but nowhere would I have ever thought, now in my 40s, how much gaming in sports, and the reality is you hit it, it's just culture. It's all culture. It's cool, right? When you think of Nike, it's cool. When you think about gaming, you think of cool. When you think about, like a face clown, I think of cool, right? And it was that integration of cultures that, quite frankly, I always tell those people, like, people our age, I'm like, the guys our age, that's the reason cards are still hot. That's why we all collect the J's. That's why we know who Kobe is, because we grew up, like, we all had Kobe's rookie cards, right? We all had the comics. We knew what Marvel was. This was so abnormal back in the day. Like, you couldn't go on a date, and, like, you young guys need to thank us OGs on this. You couldn't have freaking G.I. Joe and Iron Man, much less talking to someone as important as Tommy. And it's just a normal cultural thing. And that's why I love it so much, right?
Yeah, it's also a shift, David. Like, if you think about it, right? Like, people who are in the boardroom, who are executive, who are making decisions now, it's like our age group now. And we grew up pop culture, rap music, whatever, hip hop, and game, and we're bringing that to mainstream, right? That's like a new wave of leaders.
It is. When I think about crossovers, and I tell people, like, remember Kobe had his rap album, and Shaq had his, right? Remember Shaq had Twisms, and big Shaq guy. I always love Shaq, right? All these guys. But that was like, and Allen Iverson was trying to do the same thing, and it was almost unaccepted, right? But then now it's like you're a gamer, you're an athlete. Athletes, like, I'll play with all my friends literally after playing, and they will sit there and we will game with them after they're doing whatever they're doing, fighting, basketball. and they rather play because they feel at home and they make it work. And to your point, the high level IP and your ability to go digital and create these streamers is pretty important. How does someone stand out to work with, groups? Like, what would you tell someone that they need to do a little bit differently that can make them stand out?
In terms of being a
In terms
streamer,
of getting represented, or do you looked upon by your company or other big companies? Like, what do they do that has to be a little bit different that can give them the umph, that little bit of an edge that says, hey, I mean, outside of running through a fire and emailing Nike directly, that's the umph. But what is the umph now for content creators?
I think the up now, from my opinion, it's like you have to be authentic, right? But authentic in a way where you also have character and charisma, right? Like, I hate to bring this up to like back in like the WWF day, like wrestling, that all have like a personality, right? They all have a character. But what I'm saying is like, be you, play your character, but amplify that, right? So that the public can see it. Anybody can be a content creator, anybody can stream, but the successful one has their persona, has their character, but it's also authentic to them.
Right. I love that. Authenticity is key, and it's extremely important. And, as you continue growing on journey, you have another really important foundation that I want to get into. And we talked a little bit of this personally, but obviously you're a big MK guy, right? Because I'm a big MK guy, so we're going to have to battle it out one day on that one. You heard it first. David and Tommy will go each other on MK. Hopefully I don't lose that bad. But you're a beautiful child, right? Tell us a little about Raiden and about what's going on and the mission that you have personally put. Because to me, when I first heard the story, and let me give you guys full context of the story. We had another interview at one of our other channels, and Tommy was on. And I wasn't on it. I obviously had to watch it, but I remember watching it and listening to it and reading it. And I think that's when I reached out to Tommy directly, and just we bonded, right? We bonded not just because of our love for gaming and our love for sports, but we bonded because of humanity, right? Just, I'm here to listen. I'm here to support you the best that I can. And you did all these amazing things, and you're still continuing to do all these amazing things. And you're a big gamer. And now with Raiden, tell us a little bit about what is going on in this situation that we're currently involved in.
Yeah, and so my son Raiden, again, he's named after the Mortal Kombat character. I remember we were going through like different names, and my wife was thinking about like Trevor or something. I'm like, that's too common. I'm like, what about Raiden? And she's like, oh, that's an awesome name, right? And she's not a gamer. She's like, let's go with that name. And so no one mentioned to her like Raiden was the Mortal Kombat character until like the baby shower.
Oh my God, that must have been
too late.
I got to hear that story too. But so then what happened?
Nothing. She was a little shocked, but she was okay with it. I mean, she said it was okay. Like, we painted a room. We had like a big ass sticker that say Raiden. Like, how do you go back now? You know what I mean?
You're a smart man, Tommy Fan. You're a smart man.
But it's such an awesome name. It's unique, right?
Beautiful. It's a beautiful name.
So yeah, like, he was born like right before the pandemic, like February 26th of 2020, right? Like, yeah, COVID was around, like people didn't know much about it. And so he was born then, and then, the first 3 months of his life, everything was good because we have a daughter who's 4.5 now. And, I love sports. I'm a Nike. So her name is Jordan, named after Michael Jordan, but spelled with a Y. So Jordyn. But anyhow, the first 3 months of Raiden's life, everything seemed okay. Like, your normal child. And then he was just like vomiting like 5-10 times a day. And then he started twisting and turning in weird ways. I'm like, ooh, this is not right. And then we went to our pediatrician at the time. And what a scary moment. Like, I kid you not. Like, just think about it. This is early pandemic, early COVID. Everybody's wearing masks. Everybody's going to turn into a zombie. What's going to happen? No one knows, right? Like, all the media was just striking fear into us. Like, what the hell is happening? And I'm here in and out of the doctor's office in the hospital with my son, who's not, doing well. And his first pediatrician was like, maybe, he's just had reflux or allergy or something like that. And so we believed them. And then, like, months and months went past, and he was like 8 or 9. He didn't hit any of his milestones. I mean, 8 or 9 months. He didn't hit any of his milestone. He wasn't like sitting up. He couldn't hold his head. I was like, man, I definitely know something is wrong. And so we switched pediatrician, and then his new pediatrician was like, something is definitely wrong. He's both, floppy and he's both stiff, right? Meaning like, so that he can't control his body. You go from really floppy and you go from to stiff in an instant. So that was an issue. And then she was like, yeah, we need to bring him into the ER, get him admitted, get all the scan, get all the blood work to see what happened. So we did that. It was September of 2020. We were in the hospital for 10 days. We ran all the scans. We looked at his brain. We ran all the blood work, like nothing. They couldn't find anything. Like his brain was fine. It wasn't damaged. Like a lot of kids with cerebral palsy, right, present like Raiden because they have brain damage. But when they scan his brain and for seizure activity, there was nothing. It was just normal. They couldn't figure it out. And so they're like, maybe he's just, delayed or something undiagnosed. We just don't know. But we did come home with a feeding tube because at this time he kept on puking. He couldn't gain weight. And he couldn't take anything by mouth. He stopped being able to take a bottle at that time. And so we had this tube from his nose to his stomach that we would like pump food into it. So just think about that. But then with his disease or, his condition, like he would puke all the time. You know what that means? When he pukes this freaking tube either out of his nose or like come out from his stomach to his mouth. Right. And so every single time, instead of going back to the doctor or the ER to put it in, because every time it's a wait, right? And that also costs us money. So we learned how to like put it back in at home. So what that looks like was my wife would pin him down. I would take this tube, put it down his nose, through his throat, into his stomach, hoping that it'll get into his stomach and not his lungs, because you feed stuff into the lung, you could kill the kid. And so that was scary. And I learned how to do it. And we would do that daily because he would puke all the time. And his puke was so strong, like he would puke out that tube. And sometimes we would have to go to ER because I would question myself, is it in his lungs or his stomach, right? And so we did that for about 2 months. Like, dude, you had to be like mentally strong. Imagine pinning down a kid and doing that. It's not something any parent or anyone wants to do. And so we're like, enough is enough. And so we decided around Christmas, we decided to do a surgery to have, that feeding tube directly into his stomach so that we wouldn't have to go through his nose every single time. It was just uncomfortable. And so, yeah, it was, his first birthday was like January of, 2021 at that time. Like still couldn't figure out what was wrong. So we switched hospital and we finally looked at all 20,000 of his gene. Again, I was able to push for that because of my background working at the Oregon Health and Science University, right? And also wanted to be a doctor. So like a blessing in disguise because of my background, I knew what to push for. To look at all 20,000 of his gene, that took several months. And in August of 2021 was when we found out he has this defective gene. And the gene is called UBA5. Like you and I have UBA5. Ours is totally fine. His is mutated. And remember his genetic counselor telling us like, hey, it is what it is. This is the gene mutation that he has. There's only like 30 cases in the world. There's no research. Nothing can really be done. And his condition lines up with other kids. Most of them are like trapped in the body, can't control their arm, the body, never walk, tons of seizures. Some kid passed away in infancy and even toddler years. So we know like his life expectancy is short at that moment, right? And so as a parent, like, your heart to stop, like your life is over. And I'm like, what have I done in my previous life or what? But like from going in and out of court back in my early college days, right? That was crazy. From surviving a house fire, that was another crazy thing. And I didn't mention this earlier, but I didn't have a close connection with my parents. I have a closer connection with my wife's mom, who I've known for like 15 years. She passed away from cancer in 2016 as well. So that was a really tough time for my wife and I. So 3 events, right? It's like not many people go through those 3 events. In and out, court, house fire, mom died from cancer. It's like, okay, what are the chances of having a son with disease? But not only that, an ultra rare disease where there's only 30 cases in the world. It's like, what in the hell? Like, what have I done to deserve this, right? So all this negative thoughts, it's like, how can I even live past this? This just absolutely sucked. Like, dude, like, there's no way I can live through this. But at the time, like, because of our daughter, my wife and I aligned, like, hey, we have to move forward. Our daughter is here. We need to give her the life, the best life possible, knowing that her life itself will be different. And so, yeah, we spent a month just in a very dark place, David. And then I snapped out of it. I told my wife, I'm like, you know what? Just because the doctor said nothing can be done, there's no real research, doesn't mean the impossible can't be possible. Given all the shit that I've been through in my life, I know it's possible. And because of my background in biotech, I had the connection. So started diving into gene therapy, and knowing about the possibility there. And so I just reached out to several leading gene therapy institute in America and making that pitch to them like, hey, is this possible? Like, what can be done? And so we decided to partner with UMass Chan Medical School out in Boston because they believe they can do this. And so it's a 3-year program, gene therapy program with UMass. Now, within 3 years, will Raiden survive? We don't know. Will his condition get worse? And if it's too worse, will the treatment even work? We don't know. But what we do know is we have to try, we have to fight, right? And so year 1 is up. Now we have 2 years left. We have to raise about $4 million to accomplish this. And if it does work for Raiden, it'll work for other kids as well. So we're creating a treatment that'll be working for other kids suffering from UBA5 that never existed before. It's just about a year and a half ago. And we're driving that, right? And then as I integrate myself into the rare disease community, I've also noticed something which is really crazy. And I hate to throw race into it, but everywhere you look, there's a discrepancy of family understanding about rare disease or even going through this journey or even attempting to create a treatment because of the lack of education. There's just people of color is not part of that journey. I guarantee you, look it up. There's none. Like you see Time Magazine, USA Today, People Magazine, no one, especially of Asian descent, besides, us, which is kind of crazy, right? So we're creating hope as well for those communities. We have had a lot of Asian family reach out to us, say, hey, how can we do the same thing? You and I talked about this, like rare disease, affect, 400 million people around the world. And a lot of them are like people of color, Asian, Black, Latino, but people don't talk about it because a lot of time in our culture, it's a taboo. And I'm here in the public talking about it. Like, what you see, what you hear is me and my family, what we're going through. Like, I'm putting our business out there in the public so that people are aware and that they can do the same thing as well. Like, as we're going through this journey, sorry for such a long story, but we're creating a playbook for future generation as well that they can adapt, right? They have hope just because someone said nothing can be done, but it can be as long as you're willing to fight for it.
You know, what's crazy is I hear the story. You know, I had a couple discussions for this, man, but Tommy, kudos to you and your strength, man. And I say this live, and I want everyone to understand this, like, life is fucking hard, man. It is definitely not the way that I, as a little kid, I'm sure you ever thought it was going to be. And it's got all these weird twists and turns and all these things that no one talks about. We've been around for God knows how long, and we don't have answers to the most basic mysteries of life. And then you, who I have a very good idea what you went through because I probably went through a lot of it with you, right? Subconsciously and quietly, because we were told to shut up, as most of us kids were told to do as minorities. But it's not about the minority thing. It's just, in general, people of poor economics, like you said, conditions, minority, whatever else it is, we don't talk about it because it's a shame. We don't talk about it because it brings burden. We don't talk about it because you must have done something wrong some way, somehow, during the time of whatever it was for this to happen. And you even alluded to the word past life, which means that is the comfort that we have to give ourselves, especially in the Asian culture, right? Because it's time through life. It's the past life. What did you do in the past life? But the reality is you have broken all the stereotypes and went out there and put this out there with no fear of what anyone says because of your impending love for your son. And my man, that is why you're on this show. That is why we want you on all the other shows, because it's just love. It's the same love that we wish, that pure, unadulterated, I just love you because you're my kid. The same shit we probably wish we were kids. And I'm sure our parents did it in their own ways. Yep. But you're doing it in such a crazy platform, such a crazy journey. And the amount of kids that you said from EB5 that don't even know, that might have it, that can be diagnosed. It's like when I listen to your story and knowing a little bit of the story beforehand, this is what you're meant to do. You were meant to help people do this amazing stuff, right? You did the pediatric cancer stuff. You were the board of directors, you know, at the cancer side of the kids, right? You did a lot of amazing things. And now you're leading back to this amazing mission. And I want to thank you, man, because most people don't have the balls to do what you did. I mean, it's one thing to run out of a burning building, which I can't imagine what it is. That's some big, giant things. But this is an everyday, you have to tell your kids, you have to do what's best. You have to be mentally strong. You have to have a lot of love. And thank you for that, man. Thanks for showing this world that someone of your level and your esteem and your intelligence and your attitude can still make the best of it, despite a situation that they might not want. You know?
Yeah, David, it's the attitude, right? Like, I'll be lying to you if I don't wake up every morning and I'm like, this fucking sucked. But being able to convert that negative energy into like a positive and say, okay, it sucks, but I can do something about it. And like, if I end up not being able to help my son again, that's TBD, you just don't know. But when we know that this journey that we're on, my wife and myself, we can help so many other people, right, in the future. Actually helping now as they follow our journey, people are inspired to being able to do the same thing and also wanting to help as well. But yeah, it goes back to like just having that positive attitude, no matter how negative the situation is. Like for all you listening and watching out there, it's like, yeah, y'all can have a bad day and like complain about work and all this stuff. I mean, I don't want to put myself on the spot, but look at all of the terrible things that I've been through, right? And I still have that positive mindset to keep fighting, keep moving forward, and just loving life and loving your family, man.
There's literally no point in being negative. And I think that has a lot with the way that we grew up in that older generation of dads and moms, right? Because even if you watch TV, like everybody wanted Uncle Phil to be the dad. Everyone wanted Carl to be the dad, right? That was the dad. That's why Urkel went to hang out with Carl, right? You never saw Urkel's dad, but you went from there. And then the generation before, like our generations, it was a war-torn generation. Whether it was your family, whether it was my family, whether it was the American, it doesn't matter whose family it was. It was a war-torn generation for everybody. Everyone has to do this war-torn, and it causes things. But your love and your ability to do that has been so amplified. And like you talk about positivity, people are like, "Oh, you're so positive, dude." What is the point of being negative? All it does is like the world's already beating us down. Why do I want to beat myself up with it?
Yeah.
Right? And it's easy. Dude. I tell you what. You think it's easy to be positive? Do you think it's easy to smile during times when you really just want to cry? Every single human being that's listening to this during the holidays, we're all going through it. But there's been 1 billion people who have made it, right? And we all have different things that are coming in our lives. But to Tommy's point and my point, it's like you really do have that ability to look at things better, and then it creates an energy for more people to learn about it. And you said something that was so beautiful, Tommy. You said, how many people can we still help with this, right? It's not just about you raising it, you know, and going from there. It's about helping people identify an issue that can be identified and not giving up and not quitting, the purest form of love, man. And so that's such a beautiful thing. And you know, when I think about what you're doing in this type of journey, you know, what we have our Art Basel event coming up. We talked about naming the MVP trophy after Raiden, right? That's a cool name. Right, our celebrity tournament stuff, but that's our support with you because you're not on this journey alone, man. You have us, you know, my community hopefully can tune in and listen and help you raise and fund and push us out, and all the other, you know, partnerships that we have. I think would be great to know what's going on there. But Insight is a survivor and a man, like fires and all this other stuff. To where you got, where do you think you got this from, man? Like I always wonder this, and I don't know if I read a study the other day, and I was watching. They were like, this is before Twitter got sold. So they use Twitter, they use Google, they use Microsoft. They're like, dude, these 3 kids, man. These 3 kids are all Indian kids, but they all came from the same place. The same place me and you came from. Nothing. Just nothing. Just trying to figure it out in a new world. And it was survival. They had to make it. And it was just something different. But what gives you that instinct, man? Because you're not just a survivor, you're a survivor with a good attitude. Right? And that's between this one and a lot of other ones. Like, you're generally doing that. What it wasn't ingrained in you. So what was it?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer. Like, I'm now you're making me think back. Like, I think it goes back to my parents. Even though when I was younger, I didn't have a good relationship with them because their style is different. As I'm older, I respect them now, right? Like it's just a generational gap thing. Understand my dad suffered from PTSD, not knowing that.
Cultural gap
Well,
issues, right?
yeah, all of that. But I think it stemmed from growing up in my family. My mom is a very strong Catholic, so at the end of the day, she's very loving and caring. And then my dad is very tough because he was in the war. He was mean, he was tough, he was verbally abusive, right? Like these days, I don't think kids can
Yeah, that
survive.
was just called dad being mad on a regular day.
Yeah, like my dad
Yeah,
was
it wasn't
like,
even a discussion. It was like that was just normal. Screaming and yelling.
yeah, he was like, you suck or you're not
Yeah,
good.
normal.
Your cousin,
Normal
like it's normal, right? And then in the way I was raised back then, it's not acceptable now, but I would like get like whipping behind. Like I swear to God, I had to, kneel down on like a durian, nothing that should be done, right? But that was how I was raised, and I was just tough, man. And then just, growing up within like a community where there's a lot of like minorities as well, and just learning how to like survive on the street, for lack of better words, but then be grounded in kindness from my mom, right? Just because of her like Catholic tradition or religion. She just loved people. I see her always going to the community, giving food, giving clothes to people. Like maybe that's how I became this loving and kind person through her. I'm not sure how it influenced me growing up, but probably likely. And then just having my tough dad and just the environment that I'm in and having to survive that.
You know what's crazy is when I go back and I do exactly what you probably did, and you're probably going to think about it this weekend, which I probably do to you a lot of now, apparently as friends. But that's one thing I've wanted to really think about in my life. How does a kid come from Taipei with nothing, somehow make all the connections I've made, didn't go to good school, didn't have a lot of friends growing up, but somehow still did what we had to do? And I think it's compassion and love, man. I think when I hear your story and our story, and I want everyone to understand this, like, it is not easy being nice. It is not easy to get shitted on. It is not easy to get pushed on. It is not easy to feel like you're getting bullied because you're trying to be a nice person. It is not an easy feeling. In fact, it is the hardest thing. It is a pride-swallowing siege that no one will ever tell you about, especially in business and in life. And as men, it's even harder. And I guarantee you, all men are hard. It's hard to do this, but I promise you, as Asian men, it's just as difficult because we definitely don't talk about this stuff. And so that compassion and love, I think when people end up losing it, they get so jaded and they get so angry and they get so mad because it's just easier. And you, Tommy, everything you've done, man, kidding yourself out of that hole in the month and saying, we got to make this better for everyone else. I think that's what keeps people up in the morning. It's not about you. It's about the everyone else. And it has to be about you, but you've done that. And so I think it's such an amazing story, man. Like it excited me to get you on this podcast. It excites me that as we continue our friendship and the things that you've done, but your compassion and love is so great. Tell us, where can people look up more about how to help out with Raiden and his and the foundation that's there, and more about you and your story. Where can they find you?
Finding me is difficult because I've never gone public with my story. I don't really talk about my life until recently, until having to be in public eye because of my son. I just really never talk about my background. In fact, this is the first time I've been on air just talking about my background, how I grew up, because connecting with you, right? Just positive. I felt like, you know what? It might inspire someone. It might inspire some kid that's going through a tough time and see me or you and say, oh, I could be there too. Right?
You can be, and it's tough because no one said we could be there. Like, you understand this. Getting yelled at by your parents on a daily thing and having to understand why they were immigrants and why you didn't have enough money and why you weren't doing good as the other kids were was because you couldn't help me and you can't speak the language, and they have parents that can help them, that can literally read past second grade. My parents can read past third grade. They're like, we can't help you anymore. And when it got to the math problems, when it got super SAT wise, they couldn't help us anymore. Right? So the point is, but there wasn't anger and there was love. Just unadulterated love. Even now when you're saying it, you can feel the love you have toward your dad and your mom. You can feel the compassion. You can feel the one thing I said about my dad, and this is, I said this a lot in my podcast. I said, I just learned to love my dad for who he was and understood his conditions than loving him for who I wanted him to be.
Yep.
And if I was born in those conditions, I would probably be worse. right? Because I didn't have to deal with a war-torn country. I didn't have to flee. My grandpa didn't, you know, my dad didn't have to flee. You know, I'm in the US. Yeah, I was homeless and yeah, it was tough. But man, I couldn't imagine dealing with that. And so that love and compassion, I think, is such a great thing. And we really appreciate you sharing this story, and especially on your 37th birthday, the lives that you're going to change. And I hope this skills out and helps more people, because that's really the purpose of this, right? There's no sponsors. We're doing this because we just love the world, right? And we can help inspire them. Tommy, is there a site that they can check out Raiden's story or anything else?
Yeah, so if you go on RaidenScience.org. So it's Raiden, RAIDEN, and then RaidenScience.org. And so all the information is up there. You can learn more about his story from that. And
Awesome.
The last thing I just want to say is, like, yeah, our journey, or the journey I'm on, it's all about like 3 words, right? Like I tell people, it's all about hope. Just don't give up the fight, whether it's, you know, rare disease or whatever you believe in, right? Just have hope that you can achieve your dream. And then just inspiration, right? Hopefully my journey can inspire people to do the same, again, whether it's in this rare disease field or anything they want to do in their life, right? And then lastly, it's just humanity, right? You mentioned compassion. It's just people coming together to make a difference in the world, right? Agnostic of what I'm doing myself. So
that's right. Tommy, thank you so much for your time. Happy birthday. Thanks for sharing your amazing story. We look forward to hearing you and this amazing journey that you're going to change the world with. For David Chen, Tommy Pham, and then, of course, the awesome Raiden Foundation as well. We thank everybody for your time today. Happy holidays. Find love and compassion. It's not as bad as you always make it be, and always have a great positive attitude. You guys have a great night. Good night.